Hey y'all, it's Wildcat 6305 coming at you from Ike's Treehouse outside of Augusta, Georgia. Today I got a video. This is a different style video. This will be my kind of first tutorial semi-strategy video that I'm doing, and and really the concept that I want to do, the reason I'm doing it, and this is kind of, I'm just going to say this up front, is because I think I finally have versed myself where I understand a concept and understand a rule. So if in my video you see something I say wrong, something like that, or something that's in violation of a rule or wrong, feel free to just comment and let me know, and I'll correct it or reshoot this video. But the big thing is, I think I understand the rule now, and I think I can explain it. So I'm one that once I understand something, I do better to go ahead and try to explain it to somebody else, because that kind of reinforces my knowledge of it then in that way. But that's just kind of my teaching style. So this video, so I say that to say the video I'm doing here is going to be over the Dutch East Indies, the Dutch territories here in the Pacific, and then that will kind of roll into the Money Islands, and then which is probably going to roll into the Pacific, what I kind of like to refer to as the Pacific chessboard of, because really the ocean, to me, I feel like I'm playing chess, whereas over in Europe, even in mainland Asia, you kind of feel like you're playing Risk when you're battling on land. But when you get out here into the naval conflict in the Pacific, you feel, to me, it kind of feels like I'm playing a game of chess or something. I'm moving pieces and blocking and things like that. But jumping right into it, one last thing before I get into here, I set my game up, just kind of playing myself, playing both sides, just going to play testing some rules, just kind of a cold run, trying to see what was some house rules I'm looking at. One thing that you'll notice that I'm not talking about in this video, but is I recently got the Oil Wars expansion from HBG, and with that, and I just went with the cheaper one rather than the nice acrylic set of tokens. If you've seen that expansion, you know what I'm talking about. Don't really want to get into that. I have my board, they're set up on my board because I'm playtesting that, but not really planning on talking about that. So just kind of ignore it when you see those. I'm one that if I saw this sitting on my video, on your video, I'd be just enamored the whole time until he said something about it. What is that? I don't have that piece. What's going on there? So that's Oil Wars, and I'm not discussing that today or in this video. So the Dutch territories. Now this is a rule that, to myself, the first couple of times I played Global 40, I messed up this rule big time. Of course, we didn't finish the game, so you can't really say if it played a big major impact or not. Excuse me. But that's kind of, I feel like I understand it now. I understand it enough now to cover it. So the Dutch territories, some people kind of see these in the Pacific. Outside of Mongolia, you don't have any neutrals. You don't have any strict neutrals, pro-allies, pro-axis neutrals in the Pacific. Mongolia is just kind of its own thing, but we're not really covering that in this video either. But the Dutch, some people see them as a neutral, and some people see them as like a pro-allied neutral, but that's not correct. And just kind of review what the pro-allies neutrals are. Like in Persia here, you have Eastern Persia, and sorry about that. So you have Eastern Persia and Persia here that are pro-allies, and next to them you have Iraq, which is pro-axis. Let me move my camera here. So the difference between, with your normal neutral, such as Turkey, if anybody invades them, then they immediately turn the other neutral nations and other strict neutral nations pro opposite of you. So if you're the Axis, you invade Turkey, you've now turned all the strict neutrals into pro ally, and vice versa. But the pro ally, but the either pro or the stanced, aligned, I guess, neutrals, the either pro allied or pro axis, then, well, those are just if you're an ally. If it's pro ally and you're an ally, you move in, you take that territory. And so now that adds into your economy. And if there's some troops there, then those troops become yours. You replace them. So like here in Persia, if you take Persia, say the British marched over from West India and took Persia, then they would gain 2 IPC to their income, and then they would replace this soldier with one of their infantry, and now they have those 2 infantry and they control the territory. However, when you get over to Iraq, say let's go ahead and do this. We'll rob that piece there. But say that these guys, now the British have taken Persia and now they want to take Iraq. Well, Iraq is pro-Axis, so now you got a battle for it because they're pro-opposite of you. But when you take that pro-Axis, that doesn't flip anybody else's status. So why am I saying all that? Well, in my games, I have found that some people get those concepts confused with the Dutch territories, that they're looked upon as a neutral nation, but they're not, or as a neutral territory, but they're not either, or they look at it as a pro-allied territory. The Dutch territories are actually allies, are actually a part of the Allies. Now, what's so different about it? Why is there a difference in the rules? Well, because if you look back over to the Europe map, you have Holland. Let's get it in focus there. And so you have Holland here that is captured, being held by the Germans. So, according to the rule book, the British, and before I get too much further, one thing I've kind of become a rule connoisseur here the last few months, and I don't have Global War 1936 or Global War 2nd Edition, whatever you call it, from historical board gaming, but I do have the rule book, and I've been looking at it, and it's spawned many house rules and ideas for me, and some of the ways they take care of things, handle mechanics and stuff like that, I really liked, and I decided to to house rule those into my Axis and Allies game. But one of the things that I felt like kind of clears up some misconceptions, some other confusion things of the whole UK Pacific, UK, Europe, and ANZAC. They refer to the UK, well, first off, they call the UK Pacific, they call it the Far East Command, FEC. And then UK Europe and Axis and Allies is simply the UK. And then ANZAC, they're a part of that. But all 3 of those combined, they call them the British Commonwealth, and they're a Commonwealth. So even though they're 3 separate entities, they're kind of joined at the hip, almost kind of like the Holy Trinity in Christian theology. But with that though, there's 3 separate entities. There's 3 separate nations. That can be controlled by up to 3 different people, obviously. Well, within that sense, the Dutch East Indies, the Dutch islands here, are a protectorate of the British Commonwealth because the Dutch territory is taken is being held by Germany, by the Germans. So with that, they're a protectorate. So what does that mean? Well, kind of just like the normal rules as the rule book says, the Dutch islands are seen as a nation that their capital's been taken. And they're seen as an ally with their capital captured. So much like when Paris is taken, which actually in the setup I have Paris, in the playthrough we were going through, the Germans didn't take Paris, so that was a little bit embarrassing. But anyway, so So Paris is still alive and held by France, but we'll see how long that takes. But anyway, but normally Paris is taking G1. And so all the French territories are still being held by French troops. However, so like an American, or so like once the the UK starts at war, so just saying that, so the UK is allies with the French, they can land troops on the French territories, but they don't gain those territories. They don't gain control of them. So like French Indochina here, if the UK move in, they don't gain that 2 IPCs from French Indochina. They're just there. They can use that territory as a landing spot. They can move troops there and defend it, but they don't gain the 2 IPC unless Japan comes and takes it. Then when the British come and take it back, well, actually you need a land unit, and that guy's 2 away. Let's just call him, no, he's not. Okay, so when you move the land unit back in there, if the capital was still captured, then the British will gain control of French Indochina when they take it from Japan. But it takes that axis, but it takes the opposition taking a territory before you can claim a territory of your allies. So that's the normal run-of-the-mill rules. Well, that is the case to some extent with the Dutch territories. However, with all the other allies, but because they're a protectorate of the British Commonwealth, the UK Pacific and Anzac can move their troops, can move a land unit into these islands, and they gain them just like they're going into a pro-ally neutral country and gain those IPCs. Only the UK Pacific and Anzac can do that. But all allies can land planes there. So of course, from turn 1, Anzac can land a fighter there. If the U.S. were drawn into the war, because right now they're neutral at the start of the game, they're a neutral power. If Japan had a J1 attack and they didn't take the Money Islands here, then the U.S. could fly planes down to these Dutch territories. The U.S. can move, if they had a transport to move this guy, they could move their troops on here, but they do not gain control of the island. They do not gain the IPCs, which, let's put it on Java. Let's just say they had enough movement points and made it work. So if they're on Java, they do not gain Java yet. It's still held by the Dutch. But they're just there holding it, kind of almost a support force, if you would. However, let's move these guys back. If the British, let's do this right, move the transport in and move this guy. If the British come in with the transport from India and move infantry, then they gain that territory. I'm gonna grab a control marker here just for completeness. So then they would gain this territory because it's a protectorate of it. So that's kind of the squirrely thing about the Dutch East Indies, and I won't tell you the misinterpretations that I had of it before, but essentially it worked. It's a little bit different. So once the UK Pacific, the Far East Command, or the Anzac moves in, they can on turn 1 they can move an infantry on a transport and land it on any of these Dutch territories and gain control of it and get the IPC value, get whatever is on the island is theirs from then on. However, once the Americans are brought into the war and they're officially an ally, they can land troops on these islands immediately, but they cannot claim these islands as theirs until the Japanese, assuming the Japanese, I don't see Italy coming over here and grab them, until the Japanese have first captured it, then the U.S. and that time can come and capture and recapture it and liberate it underneath the normal liberation rules with your capital with a capital being captured. So it's a little bit confusing. So probably took a while to, probably took me longer to explain it than other people. But to me, that's the thing that's always kind of confusing. Now that's the Dutch islands from the Allied perspective. What's special about the Dutch islands from an Axis perspective? Well, say and I'll try to zoom out a little bit here. So say we have Japan and they move down to, let's just say one, two. Yeah, they didn't have enough movement points, but I just want to go for Java. Or well, no, we could go for the other one. Sorry, arm, nothing but arm. So yeah, 1, 2. So they move into Celebes, and he needed to have loaded an infantry. All right, and when the UK or Anzac moves on to its protectorate Dutch islands, it has to do so on a non-combat move. It doesn't combat move onto the Dutch islands. Opposite, when Japan comes to take the Money Islands, to take the Dutch islands, they have to combat move onto it. Even though there's nobody there, they combat move onto the islands to take it. Simple enough, just like, when you're rolling into an empty country on land, like such in Africa or maybe South America. Anyways, just like when you're rolling into it, you take it and bam. However, the catch with this is when the Japanese roll in and take a Dutch island such as this. The Dutch islands are a protectorate of the UK. So the UK sees that as a declaration of war, as an unprovoked attack. And so now the UK is at war with Japan because they see the attack on the Dutch islands as an attack on them, as an unprovoked attack. Well, what does the rulebook also say? Well, when the British or Anzac is attacked by the Japanese, that brings the U.S. into the war. So to bring the U.S. into the war, they have to have been attacked, an unprovoked attack themselves, and this is prior to turn 3. They have to be attacked, or the UK or Anzac have to have an unprovoked attack. But the UK and Anzac, they can declare war on the Japanese turn 1. Pretty pretty self-explanatory and basic fundamental concept, I would say. But with the Dutch islands, though, as being a protectorate of the British, if they're not at war yet, and Japan comes down here and starts taking the Money Islands, well, the British see that as an unprovoked attack against them, which in turn means that the U.S. sees that as an unprovoked attack on the British, so the U.S. come to war as well. So just this simple movement of moving moving a transport and a cruiser down to take this unoccupied island will bring the U.S. into the war for the Japanese end result. So, and put them at war with the UK and with Far East Command and Anzac as well. So they're just kind of that kind of summarizes what I was trying to get with the Dutch islands portion. And really, I mean, this stuff may be just kind of simple. If anything, I'm shooting this video for myself, so if I ever get confused, I can just refer back to it for myself. But hopefully this is being helpful for you. So back up for a minute. So zoom out one more level, so to speak, in the video. Right here are what's called the Money Islands. These islands right here, and try to uncover them so you can see it. Which Malaya really isn't an island, but it's worth 3 IPC. Sumatra's worth 4 IPC, Java's worth 4 IPC, Borneo's worth 4 IPC, and the Celebes are worth 3 IPC. And one thing with that is, so why are these called the money islands? Well, for being islands and being worth 4 IPC, that's a lot. I mean, mainland China, I mean, there's nothing in mainland China that's even as close to the IPC values of these. It's a lot harder, a longer grind to get into China. Well, to get into China for the Japanese, whereas you have these unprotected islands down here that are worth a lot. So hence the term money islands. That's not a historical term, that's just a Axis and Allies term. So don't be, there's a lot of, that's the thing. So I'll just say that to not get people confused. Sorry about that. Anyways, so the money islands here are, this is a lot of money if you include Malaya in there as well, which that's not technically an island, but if you're down here capturing stuff, you may as well try to take it because it's worth 3. But yeah, I mean, that's 15 IPC in territory values alone. And if you're the Japanese, they have a national objective that's worth 5 islands, or 5 IPCs for taking these 4 islands right here, and which would round it out to 20 IPC. So this is worth 15 to, so this is worth 15 to the Allies. It's worth 20 to the Japanese. That's important in IPC swings when people take things. Sometimes it's not just the face value of a territory that you lost or they gained. They may have lost or gained more in that. So if the Japanese have take all this and one of the Allies comes back and takes Sumatra and takes that 4 IPC away from the Japanese, they're really taking 9 away from them. So just kind of important to know those things. So money islands, well, I think that pretty much sums it up. But it's this chain of islands here in the Southeast Pacific, right here between the Indian and Pacific Ocean. And as you can see, and I'll just put in a plug for the Oil Wars expansion, as you can see, they're even more valuable and even Dutch New Guinea is more valuable now because you have oil derricks and oil reserves that need to be taken, and that makes it even more so attractive to the Japanese because, just spoiler alert, the Japanese do not have any oil derricks. But I said I wasn't going to be talking about that. So that's pretty much the money islands in a nutshell. That's kind of the big turning point for the Pacific. That's one point a lot of people focus on, is who's holding the money islands and what's going to happen and that turnout that it's going to cause, and then also working in the Dutch protectorate, the Dutch islands into that, knowing that rule as well is important because it's one thing to attack a territory knowing that you're attacking that territory. It's another thing to attack a territory and not realizing you're about to bring another power into the war, and because so trying to avoid that from happening to somebody. But what I'm trying to do now, excuse me while I play with the tripod here, to get this set up. But another thing, when I was looking at this and kind of noticed, moving on to the next point, calling it the Pacific chessboard, and really, General Hand Grenade said it in his video. Well, I'll just say one of his videos because I don't remember which one. But the naval warfare, you're not going to win the game out in the ocean. It will help you, but you're not going to win the game. You got to win the game by taking territories. if you're not making transports to move troops to take land, then there's no point in that. And so all the ships, whether if it's a battleship or a destroyer or a submarine, all those ships are really there to kind of the most basic purpose of them is to protect the transports, so you can get transports over to an island to take it to win the game. Because as as General Hand Grenade eloquently pointed out, there are no IPC values for holding a C zone. You gain 0 IPC for every C zone on the game. So who cares? You got 20 ships. That's if you're not holding if you're not using them properly, your huge fleet's just a waste of money, a waste of resources. So with that said, there are a lot of tricks in the Pacific because it's so large. It's important to sit down and look at the map and just see where things are. I would love to sit down and do what General Hand Grenade did in his Dark Skies video, showing where all the German fighters and bombers can reach, the range of them, because that was just a very good visual to that. But I already have it set up for something else and don't want to do that. On the other hand, I would also kind of like to do like a your classic serial killer line, yarn going everywhere, or detective yarn connecting up, the mob or whatever from movies and stuff, like in The Beautiful Mind type thing. But don't have time to do that either, and kind of couldn't really figure out how to attach it to the board without leaving either tape residue or putting pinholes or damaging my out-of-box board. So we'll just take one piece of yarn to do that when I need it. One thing that I found recently here is I'm looking at adding a Lend-Lease to my house rule set. So with that, having routes for Lend-Lease is important, and knowing where, how you can get resources from one place to another. And stand started going out on me. There we go. So one thing, up here in the corner, you got Western United States. But if the Western United States are going to Lend-Lease to ANZAC, then here would be the route that you would take, coming from C Zone 10 to 12 to 27, 30, 49, 54, to get to ANZAC. And of course, this is also that can vary from house, how exactly you have your house rules set up, but that would be the route to take. So what does that mean? Why am I pointing that out? Well, from my count, that's the shortest route because that's what most Lend-Lease rules are. But to interdict, to try to intercept that, if you're the Japanese, moving your troops to the Johnston Islands, moving some ships into C Zone 30 or the Johnston Islands or the Solomon Islands, getting in this space gets you to where you can try to intercept the Lend-Lease or stop it altogether, depending on, like I said, once again, depending on the rules that you're playing with as far as Lend-Lease. And that's, that will vary from house rule to house rule, from game to game. But those are important concepts to be thinking about in the meantime. But things that are more practical to everything, everybody knows. I mean, you move your destroyer out. You move your destroyer out to block because the Japanese can go 1, 2, 3 and hit Hawaii. So you got to move something out here to block them, right? And Sireblood just had a video last week that showing about blockers and a house rule he has to get rid of blockers, which I kind of like that idea myself. But still, you got this route right here, and you need to know that. It's important to know what you're in reach of and what's out of reach for you. Because if Japan can move from Japan to Hawaii in 3 moves, well, guess what? The U.S. can also get from Hawaii to Japan in 3 moves because there's a naval base at both sides of that path. Another place, if Japan's wanting to make an attack on western United States, 1, 2, 3. This is going to be the shortest route getting to western United States to attack it. So that's where the Aleutian Islands come into place, and Alaska. If it's looking like as a U.S. player, if it's looking like it's all Stark, it may be good to move somebody out on patrol just to sit out here if you think, that kind of same sense of as a blocker, to sit out there to protect your boundary, because if you let them get all the way over here, if you let them get all the way to C Zone 10, it's going to be too late. You're not going to have an extra round, more than likely, to fend them off. And that's really all that's about. Now, I mean, they may end up taking it with the extra time. But that's the importance of that. You have a lot of air bases in the Pacific too, and I'm just going to stop for a second and say this is in no way, I'm not trying to be all encompassing, so there's probably a lot of stuff I'm missing. Back to it. You have a lot of air bases in the Pacific. Wake Island, Midway, Guam, the Philippines, which is off camera, almost off camera. Some things that I've seen Allied players do is they'll try to save. If Japan does not do a J1, they know the J2, the J3 is on the horizon, and they want to try to save these ships, save the ships and save the fighter, and just let the 2 infantry go. Some people try to do that. Well, y'all, if you're going to attempt to do that, well, if there hasn't been an attack yet, then the U.S. is still neutral. So they can't come down here, and they can't come down to the Money Islands or mainland Southeast Asia to land. So that means that they're going to have to go east back to a U.S. controlled territory. So where is that? Guam. So Guam's going to be the closest one. Even though there's an air base and it gives them 5 movement points, 1 to the sea, 1 into the next, 1 into the sea, second, 3, 4, 5. They can make it to the sea zone in Wake Island, but they can't actually land on Wake Island. And you don't have an aircraft carrier. You don't have an unloaded aircraft carrier to make it to Wake Island unless you move these ships and move it out of sea zone 110, or move these aircraft off the aircraft carrier. You can move him down. So 1, 2, 3. Yeah, he can make it to Wake Island and land there. But if you don't want to move that carrier, if you want to leave the carrier up here, or you have other plans for him, then you would have to land the fighter on Guam. And then from Guam, because there are air bases in Wake Island and Guam, so it'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you can land, because of the 2 air bases, you can move aircraft between Guam and Wake Island in 1 turn. The distance between them. And I'm really not trying to get into too much of the rules of, well, as you know, until the U.S. is brought into the war, they can't stop. They can't be in a sea zone they can't end their movement in a sea zone that touches a Japanese controlled territory. So they can't end here, they can't move there. So moving these ships can kind of become a problem right here in the Philippines as well if you're trying to save them. I'm not advocating that strategy. I'm just simply stating the logistics of it. That's what I'm trying to get at. So, I mean, you're probably your best bet if you're just trying to full on save them would be to move south and get into the Indian Ocean. Because anywhere you move east, going back to Hawaii, which the Hawaiian fleet would probably need to be strengthened, and that would be your natural tendency to move them that direction. You really can't make it there and have them any safer than what they are right there outside the Philippines. Another little area to look at, kind of along with that same Lend-Lease route I showed earlier, and I'm kind of all over the place, I realize that, but I really don't have I'm really not sticking to my script here, so. But of course I really don't have a script either. So, you can get a transport shuck going on here from Hawaii to New Zealand. Don't know why you'd want to do that. Don't know if you ever need to do that. But you can get a transport shuck going on to New Zealand. Because from Hawaii, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, with the naval bases there. That may be something for the Japanese may try to use that. So from that aspect, if the Japanese take Hawaii, well, they're now in reach of New Zealand. Just kind of realizing the aspect, the implications of when you take something, what is now the case. But of course they're see 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I know y'all love listening to me count. 1, 2, 3. See, they're not within reach from the Caroline Islands, unless I missed something. 1, 2, 3. They're in reach of Australia, but they're not necessarily in reach of New Zealand. And so with Hawaii, so if they take Hawaii, then they can be within reach of both without, building a naval base or something in one of these other islands that they already hold. That'd just be 1, 2, 1, 2. So there's still at least one territory off from New Zealand, per se. But those are just kind of some things to point out, because you have the differences in air bases, in naval bases routes, and in your aircraft and the air bases, and the bonuses that they give to aircraft, and the variable of, do you have a carrier available to land an aircraft, or are you looking to make a landing on an island? So as I was saying, it's more of a dynamic situation in the Pacific that makes it harder to say a one-size-fits-all, such as the dark skies strategy of how far can the Germans reach, what is their range. That makes it a more fluid and dynamic that can change in an instant once J1 happens. It just depending on if the Japanese take one territory or another, or they don't take a territory, their reach is definitely inhibited or enhanced very easily. So that's just kind of one thing I was kind of wanting to point out. There are a lot of things. I know I'm not covering everything, and I'm not really trying to cover everything, but I just want to cover some of the obvious things, I guess you could say, such as Wake Island. If you have let's see, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So a fighter can reach, but it can't land. So as I was saying, just kind of the importance is the important things of knowing your range on things, and what certain range enhancements you get and not get. So even though you have an air base here, you're really not able to attack mainland Japan unless you have another landing spot. Let me just double check before I say that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, because that's your 5th hitting the island. Now you can support, because 1, 2, 3, 4, you can support an attack. Your air units can support a naval attack in Sea Zone 6. You just need to have a landing spot in one of the surrounding sea zones, or have Korea. That'd be the other option. Either you control Korea, or you have an aircraft carrier sitting in the next sea zone, or you're about to move one there in a non-combat move. Yeah. So, like I said, just some things to think about, and I'm not really trying to get too much of an expert, but just hopefully that'll help some newer players like myself to kind of see how to handle the Pacific. Really kind of takes that chess mentality of moving things and blocking it and capturing it, and they're using those to capture the land and the importance of the land. But anyways, like I said, I mentioned them throughout the video, but General Hand Grenade, I would highly suggest, if you haven't watched his pieces on, or his videos on naval warfare and aircraft, I would go watch those. They're about 2.5 hours, but they're definitely well worth the time to watch it, because you learn a lot. Well, hope you enjoyed the video, and if you saw anything that I said that was completely inaccurate, please note it in the comments, and subscribe if you liked it. Thanks.